Welcome to Concussion Talk Podcast. This is episode 28. And before we begin, I would like to introduce Concussion Talk's new partner, Concussion Lab. Concussion Lab is a new company founded by a sports physiotherapist in Toronto who focuses on concussion rehabilitation and recovery. The company's first product is the Concussion Lab laser headlamp that can be integrated into post-concussion rehabilitation exercise programs. To learn more, visit our website at concussionlab.com and follow them on Twitter and Instagram. And now back to this episode. I'm Nick Mercer, and today I'll be talking to Ashley Hisckock. Ashley is an athletic trainer. She works at Premier Athletic Therapy and Sports Medicine in St. John's. And as well as being very knowledgeable about concussions, she's also a coach of the Memorial University cheerleading team, a team that won first place in the Premier All-Girl Division at the 2018 International Cheer Union University World Cup Cheerleading Championships. That is a mouthful, but anyway, that's what they won. So, congrats to them, and here's Ashley. Okay, I'm on the phone with Ashley Hisckock, and could you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Ashley Hisckock. I'm a certified athletic therapist and certified strength conditioning specialist. I work at and own Premier Athletic Therapy and Sports Medicine in St. John's, Newfoundland. And I'm also a cheerleading coach with the Memorial University cheerleading team that just recently won the International Cheer Union World University Cheerleading Championships for Premier All-Girl Level 6 in Orlando, Florida.
I've been trying to not pronounce it, but get it out for a while now. And it didn't work earlier in the introduction, but that was good. That helps me a lot.
Thank you.
So how did you come involved in cheerleading? Were you a cheerleader, or did you do gymnastics, or what, or both, or what did you do?
I actually did both. So I started gymnastics when I was 9 years old, and I competed in gymnastics until I was 17. So just when I graduated high school, I decided to give up gymnastics because it was hard on my body. And how I got into cheerleading actually is kind of funny. So I was actually coaching the MUN cheerleading team in the summer because they needed some help with their gymnastics. Okay. And became friends with some of the girls on the team, and they really encouraged me to try out. So nice. I went to tryouts in my third year of university, having never done cheerleading before and not really knowing what it was about or what was required of me. But ended up making the team and competed on that cheerleading team for my third and my fourth year at university.
Excellent.
Yeah, so that was my merger into the cheerleading world.
Nice. Actually, that's a funny story. My mom was a cheerleader back in the, geez, I don't know the age, but I'm going to, the 60s. And she didn't do nothing like you guys doing. She's just nothing as athletic as you're doing now, but still.
Well, she would have paved the way.
She is, exactly. I'll tell her that. So how is your involvement in education, your education as an athletic therapist? And as it's training for cheerleading and for and gymnastics, how did that heighten your interest in concussions and brain injury? Or did it?
Yeah, I guess I didn't get into it specifically for the concussions and brain injuries, but I guess in my experiences as an athlete, I certainly had my perceived share of aches and pains and went through therapy myself and met some really great therapists who I still keep in contact with now and collaborate with if I can, but also, met some who didn't really understand the demands of my sport and to what level I had to meet those demands. And so we mentioned earlier that a lot of professionals will say, well, if that hurts, stop doing it. And that's basically the last thing that an athlete wants to hear. Yeah. So that's what really drove me to athletic therapy. So we'll do everything we can to keep someone in their sport as long as they're safe and protected. Unfortunately, when it comes to head injuries, that's not always the case. So, concussions were a big part of my education as an athletic therapist. And as I've been practicing more and more and seeing more and more athletes that may present with symptoms of a concussion, it's something that I've really taken a keen interest in. There's still lots of, there's good information out there on concussions. There's still a lot of misinformation out there on concussions.
Yeah.
And I think, being involved with sports and, as a therapist in a role that, I don't have a therapist role with the cheerleading team, but it's nice to have someone there who knows a little bit more than the average person with
It's
regard to head injuries and concussions.
great. So I was just going to start on a moment question here, but so you've been an athletic therapist for a bunch of different teams and athletes across the country. So is there any one instant that really, or one group of athletes that really thought these guys or these girls and guys need to know about more about concussions, or that they've suffered a lot of concussions?
Any athletes in particular that seem to
Not
know more?
not names, not particularly like
No, no,
athletes
no.
in sports. Yeah, in what sports do you think there was? Was there any sport that really got you thinking about brain injury, concussion?
I guess the people who are most aware of it would have been when I was working with the Ice Caps. So obviously they're a professional
Right. Yeah.
organization, and they're athletes for a living. And so as soon as
Yeah.
stuff was going bad with them, they were taken out of play like immediately. And
Yeah.
it's unlike anything I've seen at the grassroots
That's
level or
right.
at the provincial organization level. So I got to say, like, the professional level of hockey is where people seem the most cautious and
That's
seem to
great.
have the most information. But I mean, it's getting out there. It's just taking a long time.
Yeah. So getting back to your work now. So do you have a lot of clients who come in with concussions, or just not knowing they have concussions but they do?
That's funny that you asked that. We've seen more and more. We've only been in operation now for 2 years. We do have people who will specifically come in for a concussion injury or symptoms of a concussion, or they're just not sure what's going on. So we do see that more and more. And we actually have a contract with one of the provincial sport organizations to do some baseline testing for their athletes. So they come in and complete a SCAT-5, the Sport Concussion Assessment Tool, beforehand to see kind of what their baseline numbers are. And then when they go away to their provincial trips or tournaments, if anything were to happen, they kind of go based on the baseline. Not that you should only base it on your baseline, but at least they've got something in place before
Yeah.
they go away to kind of see what they're comparing it to. And as for the second part of your question, I actually deal with a lot of motor vehicle accident clients. And a lot of them will come in and they'll say, I've been having these terrible headaches and I actually am dizzy and I have trouble focusing. And they kind of, the more you listen, the more they tell you. And
Yeah.
I'll ask if they've ever been diagnosed with a concussion. And most of them will say no, or they were, but they've never received any treatment. So it's actually very fitting that you asked, because I think we see a lot of people who actually don't know that they probably sustained a concussion at some point, and
Yeah.
these are the symptoms of that versus a physical injury.
That's important. Yeah.
It
So
is, yeah.
given that everybody presents different symptoms from concussion, if someone comes in with concussion to your work, what's your general strategy and routine when the client is recovering from concussion or doesn't know they have one but they need to recover and get therapy for it?
I'll usually go through that SCAT-5 with them. It gives you a good indication of all your symptoms that it could possibly come up with a concussion. And I mean, I'm only human. I can't remember the 20 or 22 symptoms that are listed there. So I
Yeah.
like having a record of that. And of course, it's subjective. So on any given day, those can be different. But I like to do them throughout the recovery process.
Right.
I've also done a little bit of additional concussion education in Ontario with one of my mentors in athletic therapy, and she's just phenomenal. And she put off a concussion course a few years ago, and I really
Right.
learned a lot from that in terms of you're looking at the vestibular system, so looking at people's balance and how it changes with head position, and also looking at visual things. So sometimes you'll see symptoms through the eyes. People have a hard time, looking at different objects or focusing, or they're overreaching.
I know.
So I've done some extra stuff with that.
Yeah.
And so, depending on what is causing people problems, that's usually the route we'll go. I think the biggest thing in terms of strategy and working with people is making sure they're educated on the injury. telling, some people are like, I had an x-ray, I had an MRI, it didn't show up on that. I'm like, it's not going to. It's
Mm.
not a physical structural
Yeah.
injury.
Yeah.
It's a functional brain injury,
It's
so
tough
we're
for
not
people
going to
wrap their head
see it.
around.
Pardon
Um,
me.
I said it's tough for people, everybody, to wrap their head around. Though we can't see it, and it doesn't happen. It's not.
Absolutely. It's tough.
Yeah.
So we try to make sure people understand what's going on, and we try to keep people doing what they can. So I
Yeah.
just had a patient in the other day who we're pretty sure she sustained some sort of concussion. She got hit in the head. When she got hit, she fell down. She hit her head again, and just hasn't been feeling really good since. Like
Yeah.
nothing, no major symptoms.
It's,
But she's an athlete, so
yeah.
I said, you know what, you don't get to go to your sport today because the lights are bothering you and the noise is bothering you. So we're not going to put you in an environment where your symptoms are going to be exacerbated. So I said, today you get to foam roll and you get to stretch, but that's better than saying you get to stay home in a dark room and do
Exactly.
nothing.
Exactly. Yeah. Speaking of athletes, there's obviously with their cheerleading, there's obviously a high degree of high risk of injury, just for any injury, because they're being tossed and doing gymnastic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, how does your team try to diminish that risk, or how does competition try to try to diminish that risk? Or you and your team, we'll see.
For sure. So the Mun cheerleading team actually competes at the highest level of cheerleading. So it's levels 1 through 6. And so Memorial Cheerleading is a level 6 team. So
Oh,
they're competing a lot of very high level and dangerous tricks really when it
yeah,
comes down to it.
I've watched the
Uh,
videos there.
yeah.
They're
So
intense.
few daredevils.
Yeah,
So we want to make sure that when they're learning new skills, that they're learning them in a safe, progressive manner. So we're not just saying, you know what, throw this girl up in the air, see what happens. We want to make sure that the steps are being taken to ensure that that safe progression is happening. So we may start off at the beginning of the year learning level 2 and level 3 skills that, I mean, a lot of girls walk into cheerleading having never done it before. I was one of them. So it can be scary when you're not used to dealing with other people, first of all, if you've never come from a team sport environment,
yeah,
and being responsible for either catching those people or being caught by those people, and both of those roles are scary roles. So we just want to make sure that it's a very safe progression is taken. So you're progressing up through those up to those high level tricks and skills. And then we also make sure that the girls are, fit. They're strong. They're able to do the work. They know how to catch properly. They know how to be caught properly, and all of
and
those things make a big difference.
yeah. I was told like that my first physiotherapist after my
Mm-hmm.
brain injury was saying that I fall gracefully. Like lucky for me. But actually, this question I have here is basically one you've already answered. But what do you do when your athletes you suspect when athletes sustain a concussion? What do you ask them? What do you look for? What do you do? But you basically answer that with your athletic therapy thing, I guess, because even though you're a coach, you're still an athletic therapist, right? So it's,
Absolutely.
yeah, so same
So I
with you.
guess, yeah, I mean, it works out really well sometimes. I gotta say, like, first and foremost, our athletes are really open and honest with us.
That's
If
great.
they think they've had an injury, which is probably the biggest hurdle in most sports, to be
Yeah,
quite honest.
yeah,
People aren't very forthcoming. So our girls are really good. We also, I think last year was our first year establishing this, but not for the handbook, but we actually have a handbook that the girls get once they've made the team that outlines what's expected of them and what to expect when they're a member of the Memorial Cheerleading team. And last year was the first time that we added kind of not an injury clause, but an injury section. So,
okay,
regardless of the injury, if the girls have hurt themselves, we expect them to seek medical treatment within 1 week of that injury, just to see what's going on, make sure it's not going to get worse,
yeah,
decide on a treatment plan. So we do expect that from them. And they have lots of avenues to do that. They're all MUN students. They all have insurance. They can go see a good physio, good chiro, good AT, good massage therapist. So there's no reason not to see somebody. Plus, we want to extend the longevity of their season. We don't want someone out in October when they have to compete in, November and January. So we do ask that they seek medical treatment within a 1 week period of becoming injured. And then we specifically wrote in a concussion section as well. So if they sustained a concussion, they have to follow the SCAT-5 return to play protocol. Yeah, and but we've modified it obviously for cheerleading as it's not a contact sport, and the SCAT-5 return to play protocol really focuses on contact sports like football and hockey. So for cheerleading, it looks a little bit different. So obviously the first step is to rest until they're symptom free. So none of that changes. But as we get into sports specific exercise for someone like a cheerleader, that may mean that all their stunts stay at shoulder level versus pushing them over their head. Or, we're not going to do what we call a basket toss today, where we're throwing the girls up into the air and having to catch them again, just because those forces are too risky to sustain if you've had a recent head injury. So yeah, we have written that in, and we do expect the girls to follow it. And of course, we can make sure that they are doing that if they have sustained a head injury. Thankfully, no one has really gotten anything this year, which is good, but they are all really good at sticking to the plan.
That's great. So what else is your weighting competitions like the one you just won? What are they doing anything differently? Have you noticed when you were competing, or when you're competing?
Ooh.
Or whenever, these last 3 years, I guess, when the girls really started going to the U.S. and
yeah. So the girls have been going to the World University Cheerleading Championships. This is their 3rd year. Yes. And like I mentioned to you earlier, unfortunately, I haven't been able to attend any of them. So I haven't seen it firsthand, but they do have therapists on site in case of an injury. I don't know if they have anyone specific to deal with concussions, or if they have a specific concussion protocol if concussion or head injury were to take place. So I can't speak to that. I know in years past, the team has traveled down to Atlanta, Georgia, and down at that competition, I believe, I could be getting that wrong, they've had, they call them athletic trainers in the States, but they've had certified athletic trainers down there to take care of anyone who's injured. And I'm pretty sure I have seen, some competitions will offer a concussion protocol, and as soon as concussion is suspected, they will pull the athlete from the competition, and they make sure that the judges are aware that an athlete has been pulled to make sure that those athletes are safe. I believe it was that competition in Georgia, but I could be incorrect on that. But I know there are steps definitely being taken by different organizations to ensure that the risk of concussion is low, and that if one does occur, that the correct measures are being taken to make sure that those athletes are safe.
Well, that's great, and your team obviously has that protocol and handbook to go by, so that's excellent stuff. And congratulations to your girls cheerleading team. I don't want to try different. International Cheerleading World Championships, World Cup, something like that, isn't it?
There we go. That sounded great.
Premier Girls Level 6. Right?
Perfect. See? You got it.
Yeah. World Cup champions. Okay, thanks so much for talking to us, Ashley.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Thank you again to Ashley Hisckock, and I encourage everyone to visit her website at www.premierathletictherapy.com. As always, music at the beginning of this podcast is by Ben Sound, www.bensound.com.